Hi folks, welcome back to the Hoard. Today we're going to do a leak back test on the XR80R. Just a quick reminder, this was a Craigslist deal that eventually got to me, $300, low compression, and now we're trying to figure out why. What we're going to do is we're going to use, this is the Harbor Freight leak back tester. You know, it comes with all this great stuff here. And here's this is the compression test kit. Unfortunately, the leak back tester only comes with these two guys, with which didn't let me screw into the spark plug hole, so I had to borrow one of the adapters from this kit to make that work. Now, one could put the whole gauge setup on and, you know, adjust it and see and all that kind of stuff. But given that it's got no compression, it's pretty easy to just directly run it in to it, forget the gauge and all that, and listen to where the air is going or not going and so forth. One of the things you need to do, though, you need to turn to top dead center, right? Your little T here, oops, let's get it where it belongs, and, you know, lined up against your notch. Hopefully you could see those. And then you got to lock things in place, so I just put a ratchet on here and tape the ratchet here, and this is one of those ratchets with the really fine, so I can kind of click it to right where I need it to be. If you recall, if you've been watching this series on this thing, they put the gear in upside down, but it does appear as if they time things properly. Though, if I turn the camera around so that both my lobes are completely down, if I check my valve lash, listen. Hear that little tapping? So I do have some valve lash here, but if I turn this, you hear no tapping, that means this valve is too tight, right? So I anticipate when I turn up the air, right here, that I'm just going to hear it coming out the top of the carburetor. So listen in a second. So sure enough, my issue is my intake valve is too tight. And once again, I more or less could figure that out because with once again the lobes down and about like that, the intake valve lash, it has 0. It's too tight. What was interesting when I took out, this is the slide that goes in the carburetor, and if you look at the needle here, it's like sandblasted. So all this grit and the no element in the air cleaner, it's just a screen. All this grit, quite honestly, has been sandblasting the inside of the engine. So what's next? And this is where things always get interesting and decisions need to be made, and I'm going to tell you what my plan is. My plan is to get the valves to close properly, and assuming they do close properly, and I have compression, you know, 90, 100 or more, and that's with a little oil in the cylinder, I'm going to try to start it. Obviously, I got to take the carburetor off because it had bad gas in it anyway, and I got to clean up the intake. I am going to do all that, but I'm going to start it. And let me tell you why. I do not want to take the time and effort and money and so forth to rebuild the top end of this engine to discover that it's got a blown clutch or the gearbox is blown. You know, I got first and second gear, no third or fourth, right? I don't want to discover those things later. I want to get this engine done in one shot. So I want to fire this engine up. Depending on how it runs and, you know, what I see in here and so forth, at that point, I may decide to let it go a little bit longer. And why am I thinking that? I mean, the damage that's done to the valve is already done. You know, I'm gonna, until I'm ready to tear this engine apart, I'm probably gonna leave it completely together. But once again, this is all speculation. I'm speculating that I'm going to be able to close the valve enough so that it'll seal, that I have, you know, enough play here to completely close that off. I'm making that assumption. I'm making the assumption that the rings and piston and so forth, the exhaust valve, all that are in good enough shape to get the compression somewhere near 100, plus or minus 20 pounds, and so forth, so I could get it. I can consider getting it to start. Then once again, a ride, and then from there, we'll see if the motor's worth the rest of the way of bringing it back. So, for those of you who think you could get that extra, you know, quarter horsepower or eighth horsepower or 1 horsepower, whatever your calculation is, by taking the air cleaner off, really, not a good idea. You could see it does damage your engine. One other thing, it looks like somebody had been in there fairly recently. In my opinion, this engine was probably redone fairly recently, and maybe at that point they discovered that the air cleaner element was no good. And you know, it's very easy, right? I have no air cleaner element and I putt around here. Well, other than inhaling an occasional leaf, I'm not inhaling too much dirt. But let's say a little more time went on, or maybe I was a friend who rebuilt it for another friend, and I gave it back and I said, hey, the engine's all done, but you got to put an air cleaner in it. And maybe I'm the friend who doesn't know all that much about air cleaners, and I took a look in there and I said, oh, there is an air cleaner in it, I'm good. So I'm going out to ride in the sand dunes. Well, you did. You inhaled a bunch of sand. You sandblasted your intake valve. Now you have no compression. So, you know, I'm one of those people, if my cars, if I take them in for service, you know, under warranty or whatever, I still double check the work, right? I mean, just because Toyota changed the oil for free on the Tacoma or the one of the Corollas, it doesn't mean that the job didn't change halfway through and somebody didn't put all the oil back in, and it's not a good idea to run low on oil or run without oil. I also take a quick look under the hood to make sure there are no surprises, like, you know, somebody disconnected the battery and didn't tighten the terminals, which means with a floating terminal you could kill your alternator, plus all those glitches can lead into transmission problems and all that for the more electronic models. So it never hurts to double check, and even though you got your equipment serviced, to see that it was serviced completely and properly. And once again, simple things: oil, right? Make sure it's full. Air cleaner, make sure it's there, and make sure there's an element on the air cleaner, that it's not just a screen. Very simple things, but it could be the difference between your engine lasting a lifetime or your engine lasting, you know, a few rides. Anyway, folks, I want to thank you all for watching and commenting and subscribing. Please remember to keep your feet down, keep your heads up, and get out there and enjoy every single one of your days. Bye now, folks.